This is Dan Paul with Maya Rockstars. Welcome back to the final section of this first project here. So this final project here is going to be we have to finish this off by creating renders. So when we create renders, what we see on the screen here is just a hardware render. It's not a final image. If we were creating video games, this might be a final image, or at least close to what we would see in a game engine. But in this case, we do have lights and things like that we have set up here for a render. So let's take a look at the light, for example. First of all, let's take a look at our spotlight, and let's go into our shadows here. So you notice that here I can scroll down here and I can say use depth map shadows. Okay, so if you're expecting to see any shadows here, sorry to disappoint you, you will not see shadows in the hardware render mode. So what we need to do is actually render this out. So when we go and render a scene out, we have a bunch of icons here. So we're just going to do a quick render. I'll just show you the basic rendering, which is to click and render this current frame, whatever is selected. So if you click that and it says nothing to render, then you haven't clicked on a frame to render. So let's go ahead and click on that. Okay, so nothing. So let's see. So if you look up here, you'll notice I have the Arnold renderer. And to use the Arnold renderer, we need Arnold shaders. And so we're not going to use that. We're going to use the Maya software. Okay, so we'll go ahead and render that again. Okay, so now we can see it, right? So we have to make sure we have the right renderer selected. Now you can go into your render preferences at any time by clicking this icon here. Or if we change right now, so far we've been in the modeling module here, and we want to switch. Let's go over to rendering. So if we go to rendering, we have a slightly different menu on the very top here. So if we go to render and render settings, you can go up here and change all the settings here. So we already changed from Arnold renderer to Maya software. Maya hardware is going to be very similar to what we see in the window without all the ornaments. We're going to switch this to software, though, if we don't see that already. So one of the other things I want to do is maybe create a larger frame for this. So I want to go ahead and change the output size. So this is set to HD 540 by 960. Let's go ahead and at least do 1080, since it's at least an HD 1080. And then we'll go ahead and re-render that. Click on this button here. And so it's going to take a few minutes to render this out. And Maya rendering is not the fastest. If you really do want a faster renderer, you can use the Arnold renderer. But again, that requires a little bit more expertise when it comes to creating shaders. You have to create Arnold shaders. Right now, we're just creating this sort of the standard Maya shaders or Maya material. So we're not really exploring that at this very basic level yet. But let's take a look at what we got here. So now we can see we're rendering this out, and we have some shadows, hopefully. So the thing that really took longer was the shadows, was adding the shadows in here. So you'll notice that it's bigger now. Now the frame was smaller just because I didn't size it up, but it actually is bigger. So it's at 1920 by 1080. So we can see a little bit better of a render here. The other thing we can do is go into the Maya software tab. And so if we go into the Maya software tab, we have some other quality settings here. So we can set it up to highest quality. We probably don't need highest quality. We'll probably go to medium quality for this. And let's take a look at what else we can do here. So far we have shadows, right? And we have, but we don't have any reflections really. So what happens with the shaders or the materials is initially they're given a reflectivity setting. So let's take a look at the hypershade again. So you're probably wondering too, like why don't my shaders look as cool in the scene as they do in the material here? And the reason is because of a number of reasons, but mainly, we don't see the reflections on these materials. So let's click on some of these guys here. But you can see, so like let's say the gold, let's take a look at the gold one. Okay, so the gold one is that sphere right in the center, and you'll see I have reflectivity. So if you move that up and down, you'll see you can't really see much here, but when you go to render it, you're going to notice a difference in how objects are reflected. Now, right now, when I rendered this out, I didn't see any reflections. So how do we go ahead and add reflections to make them show up? Well, let's go back into our render settings here. So I'll go back to my render settings tab and make sure you have Maya software selected. And we're going to change this up to ray tracing. So ray tracing is where we're going to see our reflections. So we turn on ray tracing and we can go ahead and render this out again. So each one of these passes is going to take a little bit longer. I'm on an older computer here, so obviously it's rendering slower than some of the newer models that you're going to have now. So we're going to have some really ripping speeds on some of the things, especially when you start using Arnold, and or if you're using an older version of Maya and using Mental Ray, they're going to be faster than the standard Maya software rendering settings. But what we'll notice here is that as soon as we turned on ray tracing, we were able to see our reflections. So we'll see reflections as soon as we get into this. So everything is kind of set to about 50% reflections. Then that's on all of the objects here. So you can see, especially on this sphere right here, now we're seeing that pattern reflected onto the object.